Hello and welcome back to the Academy of the Magical Art. I am Frater Ophiel, and this is part 2 on some videos on magical thought forms. Today we will be discussing Servitors, Tulpas, Egregores, and their creation. Now the concept of Tulpas and Servitors is really nothing new in the magical community. However, recently I've been seeing that it's gaining a lot of speed. It's becoming real popular among people. A specific branch of magic, I believe they're calling it tulpomancy, but really it is a useful concept to understand. It is a useful tool to have in your magic tool bag. So I figured I would do a little discussion on it here today. Now, first and foremost, what are tulpas, servitors, and egregores? Wikipedia would define a tulpa as a concept in mysticism of a being or object which is created through sheer spiritual or mental discipline alone. Indian Buddhist texts would call them illusionary or mind-created apparitions. The term actually comes from a Tibetan word which means to build or to construct. Tulpas are sometimes used synonymously, the word which means to magically emanate or as a conjured thing, a phantom, or thought form. The main difference between a tulpa and a servitor is that a tulpa is sentient and servitors are non-sentient. Sentient basically means that they can think, feel, act of their own accord to a degree. Where non-sentient means that they are basically here just to exist to serve their master's will. They don't really have thoughts of their own. They don't form opinions. They don't perceive and feel. They specifically serve. These are magical beings, creations that are brought into existence through the use of thought, will, and imagination or intention. Some practitioners would call this specific type of magic astral creation. Other individuals would say that tulpas are created within our minds. It is a part of the brain that rather than running on autopilot in the background, we bring it forward, give it form, definition, and task to do. And there are a lot of different ways to create these beings. There's a lot of information on YouTube and on the internet about conceiving and bringing forth tulpas or egregores or servitors. If you just start digging in, you'll find things like horror stories of these sentient beings taking over and possessing their creator. You'll hear stuff about them going rogue and turning on their creator. Just a lot of different stuff, which if they are conceived and made properly, will not happen. When creating a servitor or a tulpa, it's important to have a lot of things pre-thought out. Just like you wouldn't go and build a building without having hours, days, and weeks of planning, building a blueprint, getting everything down to the inch or sometimes even the centimeter. You wouldn't want to proceed with trying to construct, conceive, and bring forth another form of consciousness without having all of these intricate details worked out. So there's a couple of different things that you have to look at. You have to pre-think through as part of the planning process. What is this entity's purpose? Why is it here? Why am I bringing this forth? What job do I want it to do? People will go through this process and create a tulpa or a servitor for many different reasons. A business owner might do it to help the success of his business, bring people through the door, whatever. Some people will use them for healing, kind of like energetic or an astral doctor, if you will. Some people use them to carry messages. to go out and gather information from the web of the universal unconscious. I've heard those called a fetch. Very obviously, people will use them for protection. If you're having trouble with spirits or seeing quote unquote shadow people, you're feeling like your space is invaded a little bit, creating a servitor or a tulpa to help act as a spiritual bodyguard or protector is very common. And the list goes on. I could drone on about that for quite a while. However, you have to understand specifically what the purpose is, what the job is, before you really go any farther. When you want this servitor created, I am a huge advocate on celestial timing, lunar timing, calendar timing, down to the day of the week, and the hour of the day that you want to go through the process of giving this life. Things like understanding what its name will be, how it will look. All of these different details are things to really go through in your mind. Is this protector, servitor, more animalistic, or is it very humanoid? Is this servitor that is trying to generate revenue for a new business? Does this look like a nice dressed gentleman in a suit, or is this a mythical looking leprechaun type creature for association in the brain? What color is his or her hair? What color is his or her clothes, if it has any on? Very importantly, what its name is, because the name is how you will call the servitor or tulpa, and even past that, what its sigil is. I am a huge advocate on creating a sigil for your tulpa. Depending on what kind of energy is used, you could use a planetary square to assist you with this process, stack the letters of the name, and create a sigil out of those. You can really do all kinds of stuff. It really boils down to what picture will the right brain use to identify this servitor or tulpa, and what word will the left brain use to identify it and call it to you. Just like every other living thing, astral or physical, where is it going to reside, and how is it going to sustain itself? Things need some form of energy in order to sustain. They need food of some sort. That's where you hear of a lot of parasitic creatures stealing people's energy or whatever. You don't want your servitor to end up doing that, and you don't want your servitor or tulpa to starve. So take some time and figure out what it's going to kind of feed off of. Is that again, I'll use the example of the revenue generating servitor or tulpa. How are you going to make sure that this thing is rewarded for its work? Are you going to offer it some of your own energy? Are you going to offer it some of the energy that is created and expelled off of a financial transaction when money comes into your hand? That little burst that you put off, does that go to the servitor to make it a little bit stronger? If you have a servitor that is working on healing people, or a tulpa that is healing people, is it going to gain its sustenance off of whatever yuck it's sucking out of the body, kind of like a filter? How are you going to operate this? Will it feed off of the energy of the earth? How will it sustain itself from the light of the sun? You don't want this magical thought form to just get hungry and go start finding sustenance wherever it may, if it is a sentient being, or to starve itself and die off if it is a non-sentient being. And in this matter, this is one of the reasons why having a thought form or multiple thought forms can take up a little bit of time, because they require constant upkeep. And the last question, or one of the last questions, is how will you approach this servitor or tulpa, this magical thought form, in the event that it does go a little bit haywire? What is the red button, so to speak? Does this non-sentient being cease to exist after its task is complete? That is a very common way to approach this. If it is a sentient being that decides that it quote-unquote goes rogue or starts misbehaving, having its own will and thoughts, how will you cause this energy to return to its source, or to dissipate, to stop existing, if you will? I know personally, I've created the Tulpa in the past that his job is to help the financial standing of myself and my home, and to generate income, if you will. This Tulpa's quote-unquote red button is they call it by name and tell him that he's getting greedy. If the servitor starts going haywire, I just have to call him greedy and he will cease to exist. And another thing that I built into this specific Tulpa is to recognize my own greed. I know that that specific energy, the energy of money and wealth, it is a green-eyed monster, and oftentimes it starts to take control of people. I've seen a lot of good people that get money become not so good people afterwards, because this quote-unquote green-eyed monster takes over and they start to lose their values and their moral compass. I know that I do not ever want that to happen to me, so using a little bit of forethought, I stop the problem before it starts. So this way I have to constantly put forth. When I gain blessing, it is important that I pay it forward and pass it forward, and it is that energy, when that is produced, that sustains the servitor's life. Going a step past that, the actual creation, the actual birthing of this magical thought form, sentient or non-sentient. After you have conceived the idea, after you have all these details worked out, it's important that you start to form it. Now I know that some practitioners are fond of using a container, a jar, a box, something that this servitor or tulpa can not only reside within, but also be birthed forth from. So a container to feed energy into and then release into existence while calling its name and visualizing it coming forth. I personally, my method is to use an egg. The natural purpose, the natural state of an egg is to bring forth life. It already has all of the energetic ingredients necessary to bring an energy, a consciousness from one state to another. It is the carrier of a soul until it's brought into physical existence. So I'll oftentimes use a fresh chicken egg off the farm when I can get them. And then I will take a couple of days. When I gestate a servitor, I do it over time. I will pay attention to the day of the week on the planetary positions when I start it, and when I actually open the egg, and in doing so pull that energy forth. Every day I'll take some time during this process and I will feed some energy into this egg. I will feed some of my essence onto it, generally via breath. I will speak to it. I will speak to the servitor or the tulpa, calling it by name, telling it what its purpose is, feeding it all of these intricate details, having them written down. And I'll just read this paper off for a couple of days, every day, until the timing is right and you know that container, that vessel is holding the servitor or the tulpa. Then of course you birth it forward. So in my process I would end up actually opening the egg up, calling it by name, feeling, seeing with the third eye this spirit come forth and take form. And then again, I will go through, I will speak to the servitor, seeing it standing in front of me, or speak to the tulpa, seeing it standing in front of me, letting it know what all of its purposes, all of its details are. There are some other ways to do this. Some individuals prefer just to do it in one day. Some people will take different herbs and vibrations and put them in a dish and feed energy to the dish and speak to it and see it rise out. There's a lot of different methods to go through this process. But I just wanted to touch on what the servitors and tulpas were a little bit. Egregores, there are multiple ways to pronounce this word, are a tulpa or a servitor, a magical thought form that is created through group consciousness. A group of people a coven, business partners that practice magic together, whoever, will go through this process together. They will work through the conception process, they will work through the gestation process, the birthing process, and this is something that multiple consciousnesses are feeding into rather than just one. I know that oftentimes covens will create tulpas or servitors for gathering information, for keeping them safe, for healing work. They'll kind of have like a group familiar, if you will. That's another thing that tulpas and servitors, these thought forms, are used for, is just as a magical familiar to aid in your magical practices. I definitely encourage doing some further research on this topic, especially if this is a form of magic or an aspect of the craft that you yourself think you might find useful and want to delve into. So I strongly encourage doing some research, do some good study, do some contemplation, and have fun making these servitors and tulpas. Have fun learning and realizing some of your capacity as a creative being. I want to thank you again for joining with me today on the Academy of the Magical Art, and until next time, blessed be.